Still, many automation projects fail or are not started because they do not take the investment hurdle. Or after doing a lighthouse project, they do not scale afterwards. That's why today we invited a very special guest to address this issue.
Automation Awakenings, your weekly dose of best practices for logistics automation.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the next episode of our Automation Awakenings podcast. And today we're going to talk about investments. Yeah, we know from our customers that sometimes this is a real pain, how to convince especially your colleagues from finance, from controlling, when investing in automation projects. And as this is a very complex issue to solve, I'm very happy to have a real expert on that topic today with us in our studio. And welcome to Lucian Dold from Omron. Nice that you are here with us.
Thank you for having me here, and I'm looking really forward to have a very lively discussion about one of my real passionate topics, investments in automation and digital infrastructure.
Awesome. Yeah, Lucian is responsible for the key account management at Omron. And in addition, he wrote a great PhD, which fits very well today on, why are investments successful and why are they not? And I think this is an awesome background to discuss the topics of classical ROI, how to enhance it, and so on. And I think we are already in the middle of the topic. So imagine our project manager who identified a nice automation project. He's eager to start it. And then the finance guy says, well, the ROI is just not attractive. Search for something else. What would you tell him?
A lot. The magic question is, of course, what are the objectives of initiative? If we look into automation and if we look also into digitalization, it's a big topic today. Everybody speaks about Industry 4.0, Society 5.0. We have politicians talking about we need to digitalize, particularly being German. In Germany, we have a lot of discussion about Germany need to catch up in digitalization. On the other hand, it's very difficult for companies to quantify the impact of digital investments in reality. And you mentioned already ROI, return on investment. It's a clause and it's a methodology that goes back in the 1960s, 70s, 80s, where investments in machinery had to be balanced against the savings. So there was some calculation, and we have many methods to really determine how the return on investment is calculated. However, in a digital term or in an innovation term, there's always a risk. You cannot calculate everything. So how can you really bring the future value generation to a method that you don't understand completely today? And this is where basically you mentioned my PhD without going into all the details. But I investigated there is a kind of underlying productivity paradox of digital investment. And usually you ask me what I say to these customers or what I say to these people. I say, let's discuss about this paradox to really understand what happens if you go into innovation.
That's interesting. Now, of course, I would like to know what is this paradox all about?
Let me go back in the year 1987.
Okay,
so it's
some history.
Some colleagues sometimes tell to me I look a little bit like Doc Brown from Back in the Future. So I'm using now this analogy to say, let's go back into history. 1987, Robert Solow, he is carrying the Nobel Prize in economics. he created the productivity paradox of computerization. And in the New York Times, I don't know exactly if I get it exactly the clause that he said, but he said, you can see computers everywhere, but in the productivity statistics. So in 1987, so this is basically when I was 18, computers moved into the companies. So the typewriters moved away, computers moved into the offices, but the companies at that time did not really become more productive. It was either the other way around. Because of this new technology, people were afraid. They did not want to go into this new technology. They did not really want to take it on board. Some people resisted and said, okay, I cannot do my job without a typewriter. I cannot take this PC anymore. And there was let me say, a time that basically computers rather reduced productivity than increased productivity. Now we are in 2024. If we look back all the years and we look to our society today, we have computers everywhere. We have computers in our daily work. I cannot do my job without a computer.
Yes,
the first thing I do in the morning is ramp it up and see what happens with emails. We have computers in manufacturing. We have computers even in the teenagers' room. They are playing and they do their work. We have even in education people that don't use paper anymore, books anymore. It's all electronic. And if we just now extrapolate the added value of our society, of the companies that we got from the computerization that started in the 1980s, it's tremendous.
Yes.
But in 1987, nobody was able to quantify this. Nobody was able to really put that into easy formulas to calculate for the financial people, but also for the owners of the company. If we now take this perspective on automation and digitalization, we have a very similar paradox in front of us. There are many ways of getting value out of this technology and out of these investments we are not able to capture at the moment. And this is why I like to speak about this productivity paradox.
So would you say that history is repeating now with automation mobile robots?
I would even sign this with my blood.
Okay, wow. Yeah.
And another thing going back in history, when I was at university, I had a professor, Professor Schmidt, and he really asked us to study CIM, Computer Integrated Manufacturing. I forgot to bring the book with me, so I have a book from 1991. It says Introduction in Computer Integrated Manufacturing.
Yeah.
If you read this book, you find a lot of theories, a lot of hypotheses that are exactly the same hypothesis if it goes into digitalization and Industry 4.0.
That's incredible.
Yeah. So sometimes I say, I take this book, I replace computer integrated manufacturing by Industry 4.0 and it becomes a bestseller. But being serious, I think in the 1990s, the available performance of the computer system, of the automation systems, because at that time technology was not that advanced, was not good enough to really connect all of the processes and to be able to process all the information and data that comes from a manufacturing side. And this is the big difference between 1990 and 2024. Now we have the resources available. Now we have systems that are capable to handle several things. That's why I think history is really repeating itself, and we should look back about what we learned already in the 80s, in the 90s, in the early 2000s, and we should avoid to make the mistakes again, because at that time we made mistakes, we made misconceptions, but now I think we can overcome them and we become faster by really looking behind the scenes.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we have now the advantage that something similar happened in history already. And of course, now the big question is, what can we learn from the introduction of a typewriter? Yeah, now with an introduction of a mobile robot.
Let me try to make the analogy. So a mobile robot is a different mean to organize internal material flow. So as of today, you rely on human, you rely also on the humans that interface with your planning. So you have a MES system that gives you an order that a human need to pick up some material from the supermarket, bring it to a workstation, or need to bring it to a machine, and vice versa. So we are relying on the reliance of a human. However, humans have individual demands. Humans make mistakes. If I calculate all the mistakes I do every day, I think a robot can do much better if you can put it into certain processes. And the same about the typewriter. I try to make now this analogy. So
Yes.
it's a very good cognitive experiment at the moment. With the typewriter, I think that the people that operated typewriters were very fast. They were very fast in writing it. But still, they made some mistyping. Still,
Sure.
they made some mistakes. And if you have probably humans that don't make any mistakes, the computer would not add so much value in that particular sense. Because somebody that is writing so fast can do it basically as fast on the typewriter as in the computer. But in the computer, you can easily copy and reuse the content. You can make blocks. You can modularize your work. You can correct it. If a small thing happens, you can correct it. And next time in the process, you have it there. Now going the analogy with the AMR, you have exactly the same. You can modularize and you can standardize your material flow. You can understand where maybe you have some losses, you have some glitches in the process. You can optimize it by probably adding a second AMR because maybe the takt times are not synchronized quite well. And then you know, after you have a secured process, you have a deterministic and plannable process without random errors that come from the human itself. I think a human should not do, let me say, standard process, move material from A to B for 8 hours. Like a human should not type, let me say, the same type of text 8 hours. Humans are best when they are creative. Humans are best when they can improvise. Humans are best when you put them in front of a problem and say, please solve it, rather than do the same thing again and again and repeat it again and again. So like me, like you, if we become bored,
Yes.
the first thing that happens when you become bored, you make mistakes. And the same happens also on the automation side. And just want to go back to the quote of Omron's founder. He said, put the machine where the machine is best to do the repeatable things and put the humans in force to use their creativity to create the next level of innovation. And this is freely translated. And this is exactly the point where typewriter and AMRs, if we compare them, have some similarity in fact.
That's a very nice quote, and it shows also, in addition to all your examples, you showed what else you will get through automation. Now I'm thinking again about our classic finance guy, and he will only ask one question: how much money will I save with the typewriter or the mobile robot? And now you're telling me, okay, there's much more than just saving in terms of a productivity increase. But I think we have a big challenge to explain this further advantages to the finance colleagues, right?
Sometimes yes, sometimes no. I think it's a matter of mindset. And on purpose, I used the Solow paradox to introduce the topic because in many cases, this opens a little bit the perspective. If I look to the ROI or the typical ROI of today, in many cases, you have companies that say, I need an ROI of 2 years or I need an ROI of 3 years.
Yeah.
These are the typical thresholds. And to say it a little bit simplified, the ROI is you take the investments that you need to realize, and then you calculate the savings, faster takt time, reduction of headcounts or reduction of probably quality that you can overcome. And then you have a quantified benefit
Yes.
by item, by shift, by year. And you say, okay, I have a ROI that is 24 months, 26 months, 27 months. If we now go into automation and if we now go into even the digital world, so on purpose, I segregate them because automation is still a very, let me say, deterministic way of generating value. But even if I automate today, I don't have the immediate benefit from day zero. So if I automate, staying with AMR, I know you like them.
Of course.
I like them as well. So taking the AMRs, in the first 2, 3, 4, 6 months, you optimize. So you cannot achieve the main takt time. You cannot achieve the full technical availability of the system. So you always have some drawbacks. First question I ask, how do you calculate your ROI? Do you calculate the ROI with the lower availability because you are putting in some buffer? Or are you calculating it with the theoretical possible availability that you probably don't achieve because you need to optimize it? So in that sense already, you put in an error in the calculation. You have some people that are more careful, that say, okay, my technical availability is 78%. You have some people that are more optimistic. They give it 92%. And maybe then you have the financial controller that is questioning this. So if maybe 92 is there. So you are discussing about small details.
True.
However, staying with this example, think about you put now your first AMR in your intralogistic. You start to automate. This first AMR for you is your learning example. The first time you do something, you misjudge something, you design something in the wrong way, you need to correct it.
Yeah, might happen.
Yeah. Now you have the second line. You buy a second AMR, or you even say, I want to put this basically in a bigger context, and you invest in a fleet manager, you integrate a fleet in your complete line. Suddenly you can leverage on the learnings that you have from the first AMR, or maybe from the second and the third, because then you go to the fleet. And this learning effect, how do you quantify this? Maybe your first line and your second line has a technical availability of 78%, 82%, 83%. Nobody is 100% happy about it, but you say, it's doing the job, and I have a ROI of 28 months. Perfect.
Yeah.
But you can learn from that and say, my next line is on a technical availability of 90, and your ROI probably goes really down to 24, because you include these learnings. What would happen if your calculation for your first line would have been 38 months? And you say, okay, I'm not in the threshold of my 3 years and I'm going to invest.
You would never start.
You never start.
Yeah.
And that's why what we should think about this kind of investments and say, look, you have the primary contribution of benefit. This is what you can calculate. You have faster takt times, you have optimization, you have savings on the labor side. Perfect. This is
the classical ROI, basically.
Classical ROI, primary and very clear correlation between action and savings.
Yeah.
Very clear, everybody can calculate. For digital investments and for automation investments, usually what I suggest and say, let's think about the secondary contribution of value. So, for example, can you get some information from your material flow? So try to stay with the AMR. The AMR gives you also an information layer. Suddenly you know where your material is located.
Yeah.
Before, it was not really clear where it is based in your plant. Now you know where it is. So you can start to optimize already. That maybe your working cell or your machine probably is prepared to receive the material a little bit earlier. You can save 1 or 2 minutes in the overall flow of your material.
Yes.
So you're looking completely now on the full value chain and the full material flow within your production, because you are able to have the digital representation of your material flow. If you make use of that information, it's there. If you don't use it, of course, you have no benefit. And probably in the first 6 or 12 months, you don't use it because you're busy to optimize your line.
Yeah.
After 12 months, probably you say, now I have this information, and you optimize it, and you have secondary savings. Put them as well, put a price tag behind the secondary savings. Say, okay, I believe that I have probably €1, €2, €3 per shift that I can save over there, and just put it together with your primary stream of value.
Yeah, this is very interesting, and I think it's also an eye-opener for all the logistics engineers out there who are exactly at that point calculating the classical ROI, and maybe it is exactly at this threshold of, do I invest or should I not? And then I think many of them are not seeing these factors, or maybe they are seeing them, but they are not brave enough, or they just don't know, how can I explain this to my finance colleagues in a proper way? And now I understood from you that we should put a price tag also on this secondary effect, right?
Exactly. If you think about, if you don't quantify the secondary effect, and it's just a feeling.
Right.
How can you quantify a feeling? It's very difficult. And usually what I recommend and say, for the secondary value stream, make an assumption. You cannot measure it. Of course, by default, we need to accept there is an error. But at least try to quantify it and say, you believe you can save 1 minute here, 2 minutes here, 3 minutes there. You can save probably part of quality waste on that side, because you have you don't have contamination from humans or whatever. Whatever you see, just take a piece of paper, list it, and say, these are the secondary contributors to the value, and then try to put a price tag behind it. There's always a possibility to go into a discussion with your financial controller, with your manager, or whoever has to take the final decision, if this is valid or not. But usually what I realize in this process, it's an eye-opener. You start to think about the secondary contributing factors. And of course, this helps you as well to have a far more tangible judgment about the real return on this digital investment. I just want to continue because there is a third stream.
Okay.
I mentioned already the learnings.
Even more, yeah.
Yeah, the learnings. This is the latent value stream.
Okay.
So what you see in innovation projects, the first 6 or 12 months, you keep on investing. You keep invest time, and in many cases, you still do the kindergartening of the system, because it does not work well. You overlooked something, you redesign it. So means the investment period goes in the first 6 to 12 months, continues. But you learn in that time. You learn how to do things. You learn how to do the process better. You learn how to optimize it. But this contribution of the learning comes after 18, 24, or even 36 months in your company. And if you then look back, and now this goes back to the Solow paradox.
Yeah.
This is why I started with it. If you now look back, and you have companies that started probably 5, 6, 7 years ago with AMRs, the early adapters. At that time, they had a lot of learnings.
Yes, for sure.
And you see these companies today that they are able to understand how to calculate the ROI better. And suddenly, they are not speaking anymore about 3 years. Maybe they speak about 1.5 years, because they are able already to consider this secondary and the latent effects, or because they have the latent effects now part of their internal culture and project management, they are able to achieve far better primary savings than they did years ago. Also here you see that the return on investment over years, if you get it right, are getting shorter compared to the first projects.
That means now, would you say we need to base our investments on a longer horizon?
I would even say we should change our perspective.
Mm-hmm.
Conventional return on investment is looking into the months that I need to basically pay back the investments. So I say I have 34 months or 24 months. And if I go via, let me say, a hard threshold, 36 months, I stop it.
Yeah.
If we change this perspective now, so it's not so relevant when you cross this break-even point. It's far more relevant if you put yourself into a more future-oriented position. Think about 48 months. Think about 60 months. And then calculate how much added value, how much profit you generated for the company. So if you think about that with a break-even of a conventional calculation, you say, I realize 500,000 euro for my company with that investment after 48 months. If you then say, I include my secondary and my latent learnings, you see that over time, that the curve, the gradient is getting steeper.
Yeah.
And rather than looking on 500,000, you might look on 750K, or you might look on even 1 million, because you are considering that contributors. In other words, you have a far more future profitable oriented perspective, rather than just having a very, let me say, limited and very mechanic judgment about investments.
That means we are speaking about 3 layers of an ROI, right? We have the classical one, which we can measure very well. Then we have the secondary effects, which are already a little bit more tricky to measure. And you need to convince also your colleagues, especially from finance, a little bit, I would say. And I think this eye-opener is still required. Now, when I'm thinking about the latent layer, it feels for me like a paradigm shift for investments.
It is, yeah. Usually what I try to do, if you go into a company, there's not a single automation or a single digitalization project. So usually what I recommend is say, go into the factory. So sometimes we say, make a Gemba walk.
Yeah.
Go there, make a Gemba walk, and simply analyze and understand where you have your biggest losses. And then simply say, take your top 3 or top 5 losses and think about what you need to do to automate them. What you can do to overcome the losses, or at least to reduce the losses. And then it's quite funny to say, okay, calculate or estimate the RODI, return on digital investments. This is the first parameter. The second parameter, estimate how long will it take to implement this measure. You have some measures that can do pretty quick, in 6 months, maybe 12 months, and you have some projects. If you think about a complete IoT retrofit of a manufacturing line, takes quite long.
Yes.
You need to involve IT. You need to think about how you get the data, etc. Probably that one takes 2 years or 3 years, but probably the benefit is quite high. So you can really also say, okay, how long does it take? And then make a judgment on the necessary pure investment that you have behind it. So 3 parameters: RODI, time to implement, and investment. Then you simply put that in a chart.
Okay.
The size of the investment you put into the size of the bubble. On the x-axis, you put in the time that you need to implement it. On the y-axis, you put in the impact that you see for the contribution, means for the RODI. And then immediately you have 4 quadrants, and it's very clear where you focus. Start with the 1 or 2 projects that you have in the most feasible and most probably faster to implement quadrant. Start with them. And with this outlining of your top 5 projects, immediately you have an automation roadmap.
Yes.
And as a base, this thought process of RODI helps you to really overcome some of the thought process and the barriers that you have with the conventional way of looking into things.
Yeah, sounds like a hands-on tool, like an automation matrix you can also use to convince your management, right?
as a matter of fact, this is something you don't have to have a black magic study or you don't have to have PhDs or whatever. It's relatively easy cooking recipes. So I think the only challenge that you have, you need to accept that you break the paradigm of conventional ROI and you go into a different perspective. Just change your position of perspective a little bit to the more long-term and future-oriented side. So you see much clearer where you should focus and where you can take the biggest benefit.
Yeah, very exciting. Yeah, I think there are so many topics we could even further dive into. I think now already we have created very interesting ideas and completely new perspective also for our listeners on how to look on the investment of automation. You see there are more layers than just the classical ROI. And I think we could even dive further there. And I would be really happy if we may invite you again to our podcast. And for this episode, I would like to thank you for coming here, for being part of our podcast. And I'm really curious what our colleagues out there will say. And now you have more munition, new perspectives for your automation investment. And comment and share your thoughts. Is this helpful? Are you more eager, more motivated now to go to your finance colleagues or management? We would be very happy to get your voices from you out there. So, Lucian, thanks again, and hopefully see you soon in another episode of our podcast.
Thank you very much. Really enjoyed to give some background information about my thoughts, and maybe one clear message also to the listeners. I think you are there to help your company to become more productive. Your financial people and your management have exactly the same goal. Sometimes we just don't use the right words to put it together. So I think a discussion about the common goal will help you to open the mind and open, let me say, the paradigm to discuss about crazy things like return on digital investment. Oliver, thank you very much for having me here and really enjoyed a lot. Thank you.
Thank you for this nice closing words. So thank you and see you next Monday then. Bye-bye.
This was another episode of the Automation Awakenings podcast. Visit us at automation-awakenings.com.